buffering like crazy.
Good
But I
morning.
see. Good morning or good afternoon.
That's right.
Or good evening,
Morning,
wherever
good
you are.
afternoon, Good evening, whatever it might be.
Whatever you do.
I keep
Yeah.
on trying to introduce to say good day instead of putting like a part of the day next to it, but it doesn't sound as
Sounds
fancy.
weird.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
sounds
it
weird,
does.
right? Yeah.
Somebody told us happy time zone.
It's fun.
Yeah,
So
that can be a thing as well.
yep. So yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. We're back. We're hanging out with Christos. We have our good friend Stefan here, who's part of our team, part of our extended team, I guess.
Yep.
And
It's like
we're
a
gonna-
second cousin.
But then the nice
right.
one, right? The one you
Yeah,
do
the nice
invite
one.
for Christmas. Yeah.
And holidays and stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
yeah. So we got a few neat things we're gonna get into today. Yesterday, my wife left to pick up the kids with a Kindle on the roof of her car. And it lasted a while. It made it like almost a mile down the road before it flew
Wow.
off. And then she found it. She went back and found it, but she only found the the back of it. Like so the back and the
Ooh.
and the purple kids case that it was in.
Damn, man.
Those are the only pieces left intact. So
Wow.
So it's gone? No more
Well,
Kindle?
Oh, well, so that Kindle's definitely gone. My big worry now is that somebody's going to put in somebody's going to put a claim on our insurance because it flew off and hit their car or something. But
Oh yeah.
hopefully I hope it just flew off and hit the ground, but I don't know. We'll find out soon enough. So yeah, that was
Does she
interesting.
accelerate hard usually? Like floor it when she goes? I wonder how long it lasted on the roof before it left.
Well,
This story reminds me of something I did. It's years ago. I left my wallet on top of my car and drove away. And then, but then someone collected all the cards that came out and the wallet itself and came back to my house and returned it. It was very nice, but
oh, well,
That's
that's
very nice.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's a picture. So it's sort of a story and a couple different things. So you'll note here's her leaving with the purple Kindle on the roof.
Cameras are fun.
And then here she is going up the cul-de-sac. Purple Kindle's still there. But then when she comes home, Kindle is not there. And then we found it. She found the Kindle. Well, she found the back of it. So my son was my little one was upset. He was holding the purple part, saying purple pad.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah. Oh well. Anyway, so
Time to get a
we're
new
down-
one then.
We're down one Kindle, I guess. We'll have to go get a new one.
Well, apparently this is not new. Blazer Mr. Magoo says, so many coffees down the side of my car. Man, I've done it as well. Just the coffee at the top.
Your coffee, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just
that's
glad
why-
that it was the Kindle and not like a baby in a carrier, So,
Ooh, wow.
Honey, where's the little one?
the thing is, I'll say though, I was impressed because she found it in front of this place called Sweetwater Grill, and it's on the main like so when you leave our house and you go up to the road, there's another road, you get to the main road, and it's it's a pretty decent sized highway, I guess, like 4 lanes or whatever. And it made it probably a half a mile up from that, which is probably a full mile from our house. So, I mean, I wonder if I could claim. That. Like, if I could call Amazon and say, "Hey, that worry-free guarantee? I've got parts of it. Can I get it replaced? You said anything that the kids would do to it, and
Well, you
in
can
a
say the kids
roundabout way,
left
did it.
left it on the side of the car, and
Yeah.
then it's done. I would say, give it a go.
I don't know. I mean, the thing is, they go on sale so frequently, and they're already like pretty cheap to begin with. That at least it wasn't like a proper tablet or something. Yeah, it was just one of the cheap like kid Kindles that are fortunately quite inexpensive relative to like a cell phone or something like that. So yeah. Anyway, so today we got a couple things. Then Stefan's gonna he's going to essentially make us. He's going to do all the work that your admins do in making your apps actually secure and enforcing policy and configuring apps in a way that you can get them out the door. So, but being as it's Friday, we've got some community stuff. We did have a great post from a friend of ours who's going to be on the show here soon, but I don't think we can find it. Did we find it? Have we found?
I'll find the link. I'll find the link somewhere. Give me some time. It's too early in the morning. I need coffee.
Yeah. So our
don't
good friend Damien,
don't forget. You can have one of these if you send us your stories or feedback.
Yeah. So our good friend Damien, he wrote some really neat blog posts. In fact, collated a few other ones too. Apparently, doing functions with identity.web has been a really popular thing that lots of people have written blog posts about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and we gotta. How do I? Let's see. Let's get rid of this. We don't need this.
He's done a fantastic job. He's been blogging nonstop, especially around identity, which is great.
Yeah.
I'll find the. Yeah, it's like Azure AD Access Lifetime Policy Management. So I found the link. That's from the 5th of January. So I think that's his first blog. I'll put it on the chat. JP can open it and share if you want to show them the screen.
Yeah, send it to me and we'll get it out on the chat or put it up on the screen. Yeah, here we go.
It's on our chat.
And then we got to get rid of all this spamminess, all these spammy messages. So annoying.
Do we get one? Oh yes, I can.
Yes.
I got it.
All right. Anyway, yeah. So Damien written this. This one was about access token lifetime policy management.
Yeah,
which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty cool. It's a whole series of articles that it's pretty cool, pretty good thing to go look at, and especially things like token lifetime policies and. Yeah, so it's in the chat. Go check it out. So one of the things we've looked at a lot is Blazor with Azure AD.
I wouldn't say a lot, but we looked at it a few times.
Yeah, we've done it a few times for sure. And of course, Blazor, there are two sort of flavors of Blazor. We've got Blazor that runs on the server, and we've got Blazor WASM that runs in the browser. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we had originally sort of had to battle a little bit was that Blazor server side worked really well with identity.web, so you could get up and going with it really quickly. Of course, we've talked about identity.web plenty on this show, but that's sort of the primary .NET library now for using Azure AD or B2C. Mm-hmm. And the only sort of issue that we had was that things like incremental consent didn't work. And when you start like sort of backing up through how Blazor works, because it's opening up a WebSocket connection and that socket's sitting there and that's how it's getting updates. When you start going back through that, it's like, well, there's never an HTTP response that you can attach to go do incremental consent, right? So unless you as the developer go and actively say, I need to redirect the user to go and do something, for the most part, you never actually had an extra HTTP request. Like, so you'd connect, it would get upgraded, and then you're getting all your updates through this socket. So there was never a request or a response to tack onto to do a redirect to get back out. So yesterday, I was doing some looking around, and somebody asked, "Hey, I need to access two APIs. I need to access the Graph, and I need to access Azure REST API." And these could, I mean, the fact that it's Graph and Azure REST API, they could be two of your own APIs. They could be 7 of your own APIs. It doesn't. The fact that they're Graph and Azure don't really matter. But I found that identity.web does now support this scenario for Blazor server side. It just requires a little bit of extra work. So it's super cool. And we figured we'd mention it this morning. So this is an app that we built on the show here probably a couple months ago. Mm-hmm. And it's all about server side Blazor. So let me get the link up here to it for the repo, and you can take a look at it. So it's called MSID Dev Blazor Azure AD Graph, or AAD Graph. So this is the link to the repo that we're working in today. And we have a question about, let's see.
There's a
I
question.
want to ask, what is the gig with cheap Windows keys in places like CD keys, etc.? I don't know. I wouldn't trust many of them. I don't. If you're going to buy a key, then buy one from Microsoft or buy one from somewhere like a CDW or a Newegg or somewhere that's at least relatively reputable. I mean, not that those other places aren't, but I've never heard of them, and I'd be a little nervous to buy a software license from a random place on the internet. So
Agreed. Yep.
Anyway,
stay away.
Yep.
So this is
If it's too good to be true, then it's probably too good.
It is.
Avoid it.
Yeah. I mean, I know like people used to buy OEM licenses a lot
Yep.
from places like Newegg and whatever.
I actually got like multiple ads on Facebook recently for those OEM licenses. Like, buy your Windows 10 license for only like $10 or something. And you're like, sure, totally legal.
Yeah. Well, there are definitely ways to get Windows 10 cheap or free that are legal.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've got an old, there's still upgrade programs and things like that available. Yep. So unless you're like starting from license 0, then you absolutely need a new license. I personally would buy it from like a Newegg or CDW or somewhere like that, or just buy. I think you can just buy it from the store now, from like Microsoft Store. Mm-hmm. But there are all sorts of other programs. Education, like if you're at a different kinds of higher education or even primary education, a lot of schools have contracts, and you can get a copy of Windows, and a lot of places at work there are different ways to get copies of Windows. So there are so many ways to get one legally that perusing weird random corners of the internet may not necessarily be the best way to do it. Although I'm sure that in different countries, availability is pretty different in different places. So. So we've got this Blazor server-side web app. It doesn't really do much except for make a couple calls out to Graph to show me. I think it shows our mailbox. It shows my inbox, right? And so the question came in of like, well, that's cool, but how do I do a second API? And the problem with the second API, of course, is that you need to consent to it, and you could be in a position where you go to request a token with that scope, and because you're in this sort of WebSocket world, there's no way for you to go and do consent, right? There's no way for you to go say, I just need to consent to this, go and do it. So there are a couple things we have to change. So the first part is this enable token acquisition to call downstream API method that we do for configuration. So we're in startup.cs of our Blazor web app here. In this enable token acquisition, we're going to put all the scopes that we need. So our app needs 3 scopes. We need user.read, mail.read, and user impersonation on the Azure REST API. So we're going to include all 3 of these scopes at the very beginning. And that can kind of feel a little bit weird because sometimes, usually we don't have to do this up front. But we do need to do it here because this is what's going to ultimately generate the initial sign-in request. So we want to consent to everything up front. But we don't necessarily need a token for everything up front. Beyond that, you could also just go to the Azure portal and or to the Azure AD portal and consent to them up front, like do admin consent or whatever. But none of these are admin consent required permissions, user.read, mail.read, and Azure REST API. So we don't want to force admin consent if we don't absolutely need it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So we've added our 3 in here. And the other thing we have to do is there's this new method now that hangs off of server-side Blazor, which is from the identity.web extensions called add Microsoft Identity Consent Handler. I turned your mic down just a little bit, Stefan. So let us know if it's still too hot. So we're going to add this Microsoft Identity Consent Handler, and this is a new service that we're going to inject into our Razor pages, and that's going to be the thing that we're actually going to do the work with. In a typical web app, you don't really have to do all this extra work, but we are going to have to do it for Blazor. But luckily, it's pretty straightforward. So we're going to add this consent handler that we see down here on 54, and that's going to make this available to be injected into our Razor pages, right? So let's go over to our fetch data page, and this is just a page that goes and does exactly what it says it does. It goes and fetches data. We haven't even changed the titles from weather forecast, which are the ones that come out of the box, but there are 2
default vanilla stuff. Yeah, why not?
there are two that live up here at the top, and one is the token acquisition service. So this is very similar to how you would inject iToken acquisition into like an MVC controller. This is how we're doing it on the page, on the Razor page. So we need that to go and get a token. So that's our interface for saying, hey, give us an Azure AD token so we can go make an HTTP call. Mm-hmm. The second one is this identity consent and conditional access handler, which is luckily shortened to be called consent handler and how we're going to use it. But the fact that it also mentions and conditional access handler is actually interesting, and it's part of the stuff that Stefan's going to talk about too, which is you've consented to an app. So we've consented, and you've been through the first login. If you click the accept button and say, yeah, I'm totally down, you can access my stuff, right? So that's cool. The second half of that, though, is that at any point, a user may have to go back through an interactive login. Some policy may have changed. They may have changed network locations. They may have to MFA for one reason or the other. So you can never guarantee that you're going to get a token when you ask for it without the user potentially having to go through some type of interactive login or interactive sort of upgrade with MFA or whatever. So because of that, at any point when you get a token, you may have to go through that. So we want to make sure that we capture this, and that's really why we've got this extra name in here of and conditional access handler. So we're going to inject these two in here, and let's skip all of our HTML because they're just a couple tables that just show some stuff. And now we're going to look at these are our two token calls to go and get access tokens. So this is just like if we had injected this into the MVC controller. This is what we're using to go and get an access token for one of the specific services that we've got to call. So this is our graph token because it's getting user.read and mail.read, and then this is our Azure REST API token. And so those are different because tokens are limited to a specific resource or a specific API. So I can't have one token that I use against the graph and then use that same token against my own API or against the Azure REST API. We have to have different tokens for all of the different resources or APIs. So
you should have. Sorry, I was just thinking about an example what I've seen in the past. Probably you already talked about it, but where a specific API would basically accept any token for yeah. Even
as long as it's a token, right?
Exactly. Even ID tokens. They would accept it. Yeah. I've seen that at the customers as well. So I think JP, I just want to point out that that's a good point. That an access token is specific to one API, right? And that's when you're building this type of stuff, you need to keep that in mind to make sure that you have built a secure service, right?
Yeah. The API should accept and validate the token that it is for the right audience or whatever, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Completely true.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we talk about a lot when we're doing the API side, which is, well, how do I, what is a valid token, right? Because there's the base of, I have a token with a signature that's validated, so I know the token came from the place I expected it to, and then it hasn't been tampered, or that hasn't been tampered with. But then what else makes a token valid? And some of that's the data in the token, like the issuer and the audience in particular being, this token was actually issued for me. Somebody's not trying to reuse a token that they got for a different service, because if I got a graph token, for example, or the Azure REST API token, I could potentially use that and send it to another API, right? There's nothing that would preclude me from sending it to another API. And if that API isn't validating that it's actually intended for itself, for that API, the signature is going to validate because it is a validly signed token. And the issuer being the fact that it came from your specific Azure AD tenant, that's going to validate too. And so
exactly.
You can't. But now you've got a token that's intended for a completely different service, and your service is taking dependencies on it. And the other risk, of course, is that one day the Azure REST API folks or the graph folks may say, we don't want to do this. We don't want to have. We don't want to use this Azure AD token the way it is. We want to change it. And if you've taken a dependency on some other service's token format, then now your app's going to break. So, and AZ Wildfire has arrived. Good morning.
Oh, he's in the house.
Fire. Did I fix my hair? Or maybe I just took a shower. I don't know.
Oh,
Was it bad last time? I don't remember.
no, you can't
Anyway.
spend your points yet to mute anyone.
I know. I promised I'd have him by Friday, and I didn't because I just had too much actual work I had to do. I had to do real work this week. So, anyway.
Real customer work. Yeah.
Yeah, I had Christos and I both had lots of actual work we had to do this week.
Can you
Anyway,
believe that? We didn't just stream. We had to do work. I'm so devastated. How dare they?
so we're gonna go get our 2 Access tokens, one for Graph, one for Azure REST API. But you'll notice that we've now wrapped these in a try-catch, and now we're going to call our consent handler. So all we have to do at this point is ask the consent handler to handle the exception, and the consent handler is going to do all the work for us. It's going to handle everything around what needs to be done, and to redirect a user with the correct scopes so that they can consent or so that they can go through MFA or whatever is required. So most cases it's consent, but there are plenty of other cases where a user needs to go and sign in. And thank you, AZ Wildfire, for
being so kind.
gifting so many subs to everybody.
Yeah.
So I think we need to get him back on the show. Anyway, so at this point, our consent handler is the thing that's going to handle redirecting the users back over, and it also handles when they come back, which is super nice, right? Because instead of having to figure out what was my state before I left, what's my state now that the user is back, how do I make sure they go back to the place that I thought they were coming? Instead, the consent handler does all that work for you too. So when we run this in just a second, which I'll go ahead and get it running, I guess. So when we run this, we'll see we're going to go to a specific place in the app. We're going to go to a place called fetch data, right, to that path. And when we get there, we may have to sign in. We get redirected, and we come back, and then we end up right back over at fetch data again, which is super cool. So let's get so now that it's running, let me get my browser back up here, and I'm going to do an in private window so that we can kind of go through the whole thing. So we're up and running. We're on localhost 5001, and we're going to come to our app, and we're going to have to sign in. So we'll go ahead and get signed in here. And let me find my phone, because I'm sure I'm going to have to MFA. Let's see, which one of these phones is the easiest to use? How about this one? So...
Oh, it's hidden behind this green screen.
Well, it was
That
plugged in.
looks...
It was plugged in. Okay, so I'm going to get signed. So now I've done my MFA on my phone. And yeah, we'll stay signed in. That's fine. So now we're going to get over here to the app. So now we're in the app. So here's our Blazor app. Oops. Here's our Blazor app. We've already signed in, so it sees that it's me, right? And if we go to the counter, this is just the normal Blazor template, so there's nothing exciting here. But if we go to fetch data, you'll see there's a bunch of activity down here in our log. So first it gets my name from the graph, which is cool. It also gets my email inbox, which is good because there's nothing offensive in there. So it gets my email inbox, which is super cool. So both of these came from the graph, and this is what it did before. So this is using the user.read scope to get my name, and it's using the mail.read scope to go and get my email. But now
I think this also. Sorry, I keep on interrupting you. Just
No,
mute
it's okay.
me.
No,
I just want
glad you're
to.
here.
I just want to. Yeah, I just want to point out here the importance of the consent piece, right? Because what you can see here is that because you consented this app to have access to your email, they have access to your email, and this is a real life thing that happened. Is that someone built a random app that would allow sign-ins from every or a specific Azure AD tenant, send out a very well-looking email to someone to click it. They don't look, they consent, and suddenly an attacker has access to all your email, to all your data. So I think this is a really important piece to keep in mind when building an app, when thinking about consent. And I will show you later some stuff as well. But I think this is a really important point to think about that consent piece, which looks so small but can have a huge impact if you don't protect it the correct way.
Yep. And revoking consent is a big part of that too, right? So as a user, I've got the ability to do it. So let's go revoke consent. And you can do this too on your own app. So if you've got an app and you're like, wait a minute, that app looked a little sketchy. I'm not sure if that's really what I wanted. You can go and revoke that too. And so you do that by going to myapps.microsoft.com. So we'll put that link here, myapps.microsoft.com. Or is it My Applications now? I don't know. My Applications is the
It will automatically redirect from My Apps to
Okay.
My Applications.
Okay, there we go. Now we're getting redirected. So now I'm over here in the My Applications app. So you can go here and you'll see all of the apps that you use. Right? So mine, I haven't done any sort of customization of this. So mine is just literally every app that I've got. So let's find the app that we just signed into. It's called Blazor Server-Side AAD. And what we're going to do is if we click it, it takes us to the app, which this is going to be localhost, so there's nothing running there. Click this one instead. It should still be running and whatever. Anyway.
Oh
so
yeah.
we got our,
Someone's asking that about your picture on
picture?
your at the very top of your browser,
Where?
right hand corner.
The
Right-hand
company
corner of your
logo.
browser. That's,
oh, that's
no,
just
the
my
other side.
that's just
Right-hand
my
side.
that's just my company logo. That's the right. That's the left-hand side. The
Oh,
right-hand
you mean
side. That's my wedding picture. It's the only decent photo I've ever taken.
Dubious.
This is no. This is okay. Well, I don't know how much of a denizen of the internet you are, AZ Wildfire, but that's like one of the most well-known memes of 2020 maybe. Anyway,
No,
Yeah.
no, it goes far back. 2018.
does it go
maybe.
further than that? Okay, all right. Anyway, so let's take a look at the app, and we'll come over here to manage. And it says these are the things that I consented to, right? So these are the permissions that John, allowed. Not that my organization allowed, or that these are the ones that I specifically have consented to. So it lets me sign in, view my profile, blah, blah, blah. It's also doing Azure Service Management, which is the REST API, right? So let's say I don't like this app, and I'm like, whoa, this is super sketchy, and we found out that somebody did something wrong or whatever. So I'm going to revoke it. So it's going to say, hey, it's going to reduce the functionality because, of course, without making those API calls, it's not going to be very useful. So let's go revoke it. Mm-hmm. And now it says it's going to take a couple minutes for the revocation to happen, which, of course, is not surprising. But so a couple minutes from now, we're going to go run the app again, and we'll see that I have to go back through consent because now I've said, hey, I don't want this app to have access to sign me in or do anything with my services anymore. I don't want it to have access to my mailbox. I don't want it to have access to my Azure API. I'm going to refresh this, and we'll see if they're still there. This app does not have any
Is
permissions.
this the only place that I can revoke my consent, or
This
can
is where you, a user, can revoke your
you, the
consent.
user? But an admin can also go into Azure AD and revoke them from there, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yep.
And an admin can do more than that. They can consent for you. They can revoke for you. They can completely remove the app. In fact, especially if it's, let's say, an app a third-party app that your company hasn't created.
Right.
So let's go back now to localhost and let's see. Let's see if we get prompted for consent again, because this time around we shouldn't have any permissions to be able to do anything. So I'm just going to hit log out here. Get rid
And
of
while
that
you're
app.
doing that, maybe Stefan can go and create an account in his tenant so we can deploy the app to his tenant so we can do the security stuff after.
Sure. So now we're going to go back to localhost 5001. So I'll just open it up here. So that's what I'm typing in, localhost 5001, which is our web server. And you'll notice it's asking me to sign in, and it's asking for permission. So it's asking for everything that we asked for up front, which is this list here in startup.
Yep.
It's asking to go ahead and consent to user.read, to mail.read, and to Azure Management API.
Right.
So this is Azure Management, Azure Service Management, Azure Service Management. That's the REST API for Azure. Maintain access to data you've given it to. That's one of the default ones, which is offline access. Sign me in. This is user.read, and read my mail, which is mail.read. So now, because I'm an admin in my tenant, I have the opportunity to consent on behalf. But if you're a normal user, you wouldn't have that opportunity to do that. So I'm going to accept it. And now I'm back in the application, and now when we go to fetch, those two calls should work. Because now they're Now we've consented to everything, so we don't need to go back through anything. So you can revoke your consent at any time, and then you can, of course, always go back and reconsent at a later point, especially to the addition of the offline access, scope. Offline access gives your applications a refresh token, and that's one that the application itself can use over and over again to get more and more access tokens. So the fact that I haven't been to this app in 2 weeks doesn't mean that the app doesn't still have access to my data. So if I don't want the app to have access to my data, we go to my applications, we come in and we revoke it, and now that application, if it tries to get another access token for me, it will not be able to do it. So Stefan, we've got this app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's deploy.
What can you do for us? Because we talk a lot about developer stuff. We talk a lot about how to get our apps integrated with Azure AD and all the different things you need to know about. But tell us more about what you do every day too.
Yeah. My focus is more on the IT pro. So basically, talking around what you said. How do I protect it? How do I set it up? How do I configure all the other things around the app itself in Azure AD? So thinking about protecting an app, for example, actually this morning I had a call about an application that's been developed for all the hospitals. So I live in the Netherlands, for all the hospitals in the Netherlands. And we were actually talking about protecting that app because they wanted to make sure, because that app is going to show patient data. So it's a very sensitive app. And I want to make sure that that data would only be shown on devices that they manage, that they control, that they know are healthy. And that they also know, like, if this person would leave or something strange would happen, I would be in control revoking access to this data, which has been shown by this application. So those are the things that I would talk about on a daily basis. Also, one key topic that I'm very excited about every time, and it's also it's probably too small to read, but I actually put some passwords on my whiteboard behind me. Because one other thing they're not real, by the way, but one other thing I like to talk about is how to go passwordless. And I think that's also the cool thing if you talk about developing an app and integrating it with Azure AD. It already enables your app to be using passwordless methods. And why is that so important? Is if you look at most of the attacks, most of the bad guys getting into an app and stealing the data, they're doing that with stolen or guessed or reusing credentials that has been leaked out. So getting rid of those credentials all at once is a great thing to do, and also adding multi-factor and making life easier for someone to sign in. There's actually a small text. I'm just gonna point it out. You cannot read it, and it's also in Dutch. But I had some visitors who stayed at the office during the night, and they looked at my whiteboard and they actually put a text next to it. So I will translate it to English. We didn't do anything with your passwords. Don't worry. And then their names, which I thought was pretty funny when I read it. So I help our customers, first of all, gather feedback about our product, but also helping them use their product. And that was the call that I went on this morning. And I think if you're looking to protecting that data and thinking about how to do that, there are so many options out there. So we briefly touched on the consent piece, which I think is very important. You have to do right, but also what we talked about, like an access token. There's a specific audience in that token, and there's a reason there's an audience there, and there's a reason that's there. So that's important. And then from conditional access, we can actually say, like, you can only get data from this API or this data inside this app from an easy example from a specific location, for example. So one thing I wanted to start with before I'm gonna dive into the portal is basically explain a bit like when does conditional access actually apply, and you showed like in the app we have a handler that would also be conscious of conditional access. JP, you mentioned like at some point I can talk to a different API and maybe need to do a second factor, or maybe I cannot access it from this location. So the first thing I think is very important to learn is when do we actually look at those conditional access, those rules that we put in place when someone is using your app. So I've put out a whiteboard.
Yeah, we've got it up.
Awesome,
Yep.
awesome. The only thing is that my pen is empty, so I'm gonna write with my finger. So it's gonna be maybe a little bit messy, but it's gonna be big stuff. So first of all, what I want to talk about, if you look at an app, is that we probably have a client app, and a client app can be an app running on an iOS device or an Android device, but can also be a single page app, for example, in a browser. And then we can have an API, and we can have multiple APIs that are out there. And how do we protect those APIs, and how do the client get data from those APIs? And the user is going to be here behind the client. And then we have the central piece that will link everything together, which in our case is, and I'm really sorry, marketing, I know this is not the right abbreviation of Azure AD, it is Azure AD, but this fits way better into my triangular type of looking thing when I write with my finger. So again, sorry about that.
I think it's okay.
Okay.
I think we were probably higher on the list with with marketing than you are by writing AAD in it.
True. So what we want to do is make a trust relationship between those components. So we're going to register the client to Azure AD. We're going to register the API, so they all have one common place that they trust and that we can use for the authentication and authorization. And that's the important piece I want to point out, is the difference between authentication and authorization, which come in place here. And it's also, if you look at the different protocols, where you would say OAuth 2 is an authorization protocol. It's not an authentication protocol, because it talks about which type of rights do I get in a specific scenario. It doesn't really talk about how you would tell the system who you are in what type of way. And that's the authentication piece. So if we look at the client piece, we probably the first thing we want to do is make ourselves known to the client. So what you showed on the screen, it would say welcome and your name. The first thing we want to do probably is sign into that application. So because that application is connected to Azure AD, we're going to go to Azure AD. We sign in a way that we want. It can be, I used to have like passwordless credentials on my desk. I got one here. It can be such a token that you use to sign in. It can be your username and password. You can be redirected to ADFS. It doesn't matter in this case, as long as you get authenticated. Then what you get back from Azure AD in this case for the client application is that ID token. And that ID token is that there are more things, but I want to focus on the core things here. That ID token is there for the client application to get to know stuff about you. So it's like a sheet which will tell you what's your name, what's your last name, and the app can then say, hello, your name and your last name. But it isn't meant to do any authorization. It doesn't grant you any access to anything. And that's the point where now this user in this app will click a button, and that requires communication with that API. But that API requires authentication, or needs to know your authorization. What can you get from this API? What type of scopes can you get? So at this point, you need to have some kind of access token. So in this case, we will go back to Azure AD, and this is what JP, what you showed in this case. Like we need to have access to this scope. We're going back to Azure AD. We already are authenticated, so we can reuse that credential that I already have. And what I will get back is an access token specifically for that API. And this is where I want to pause a bit, because this is also the point that the conditional access policies are being evaluated. So keep in mind that conditional access will only be invoked when we do something with an access token. Because what do we want to protect, and what are we going to do with conditional access? It's about authorization. Do I have access to this specific data that this API will give you. And this is also how we can, for example, do step-up authentication, because we can say this API doesn't require any MFA, we put a rule on that, but this API number 2 requires MFA, so I can add that to this API. And then the user will be sent back to Azure AD to do that multi-factor authentication, come back and then get an access token for that specific API. So I think this is important to keep in mind when you build an application, is that conditional access will be applied on the point that you get an access token. And of course, you can get an ID token and an access token at once if you define that in the scope. Your user doesn't have to go back and forth if you only have one API. You can do that, and then at the first sign-in, when you also ask for an access token, that conditional access policy will be evaluated. So this is a little bit of the background, and this is also why it's important for if you use our libraries, that whole piece of telling the end user to get that extra credential, to get that MFA, to know about, oh wait, now I need to do something around conditional access. Now it requires something extra. That is built into that library, so you don't need to code that yourself and keep track of that, what's happened there. So I think that's an important piece also when you look at developing your app. Okay, so that's basically a little bit of basic. I think the key thing to keep in mind here is that first of all, your app needs to think about how do I need to do something. If I want to implement conditional access, if I want to put in that protection for my app, you need to make sure to have your app being aware of those things that need to happen, and then the other one is if you use the MSL library or the library that we have, most of that stuff is already built in. There's an extra step here if you want to go to device-based conditional access, but I will talk about that when we go into that building conditional access rules. JP, I actually created some credentials for you in my tenant.
All right.
I'm not sure where do you want me to? Can I do that in the chat?
Yeah.
Okay. Not the chat on Twitch.
Why?
People don't get excited, people.
Yeah.
Don't get excited.
What could possibly go wrong?
Okay, exactly. Stolen and leaked credentials. There we go. Leaked credentials.
Coward. Coward.
To be honest, as soon as we enable MFA on this account, I'm more than happy to give you the password and go ahead and try. But there's no MFA on this account yet.
No
So
rubber tables. We definitely don't trust a guy with your name.
No.
Revertibles. Okay, so let me get.
Yeah, you probably need to change the password as well because it's the first sign-in.
Yeah. Okay. So let me get these. Put them over here for a sec, and then okay. So now I am. All right. So let me switch. I'll go back over to my screen, I guess, and I'm gonna go sign in. And are we gonna register my app in your tenant, or what do we want to do? Okay. Do you want to do it, or do you want me to do it?
If you can do it, that would be fine. Then you're the developer. You built the app. You're delegated. Although I gave you all the permissions possible, just for the sake of this demo. But normally you would probably scope, and that's the cool thing, of course, with Azure AD. We have the role-based access control. We can scope it, and we can say to a developer, you build an app, you can register it, and then afterwards I can take over as the security admin and apply those conditional access policies.
Nice.
All right, cool. So I'm back at the Azure AD login page. So this is just portal.azure.com, or you can, if you don't want to navigate directly through Azure, you can go to aad.portal.azure.com, and that's going to take us to a login page. So we get logged in here. I'm going to use the account that Stefan just created for me. And nice. that is fantastic branding.
I love it.
I'll use the password he just gave me, Unicorn Toso.
Let's see if it works.
Okay, so now it tells me to update the password, so let's do that. And then I will give it my own password of my own choosing. And now let's see what else it's going to ask me. Oh, that's not mine. Hey, I must have miscopied it. Let me. I'll just paste it in here. Okay, sign in. This is the first time I'm signing in. So now it's telling me I need to. Basically, I've got to have MFA, right? That's what this is telling me.
Yep,
and
correct.
You give me no grace period.
Nope.
I have to do it
nope.
right
nope.
now. Okay.
You know I'm all about security, so come on.
That's right. Okay, cool. So I've got my. So now I'm being taken over here to go and sign in and set up multi-factor. So okay, so it tells me to go get the Authenticator app. Cool, I've got that. And now I need to set up my account. So I've got the app. So this is the Authenticator app. It's available in Play Store, iOS Store, whatever. So let me get this up here. Authenticator. And I got to scan this QR code. So I guess everybody could probably go scan this QR code right now, couldn't they?
They can.
Don't scan the QR code. Okay, so I've scanned it. So I scanned it on my phone, right? And it says account added successfully. We hit next. And now... Oh, good. The resolution's so low they can't scan it. Hey, it should at least be in 10... At least it should be in 1080p today. So I got a notification, right? So there's a notification on my phone of like, hey, you need to approve this. So I'm going to approve it. Put my finger on it because it's asking for it. And now it says I've been approved, and now we're approved. So now I've got multi-factor set up on my phone. So we click next, and it's asking me for a second one. So I'm going to put in my other phone number here.
Now we can all call you when we have any type of kind of challenge building an app.
That's okay. This is my Google Voice number. So luckily everything that goes there goes into the ether. Although it was kind of funny, a while back we did do some SMS multi-factor and B2C stuff, and I did get a few text messages from people.
Oh, that's fun.
So
I never had that, although I always use my regular phone number, but nobody tried that, I guess.
Well, I think we asked them to. So okay, so I got my text message.
Okay, there you go.
So I got my text message now, which is great. And now I've got both the app and my phone. So if something happens to my phone, I can at least get a text to get back in and reconfigure this, right?
I love the customization, by the way. It looks great.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right, cool.
I think
I'm
used...
jealous now of your design skills.
I was about to say I use some kind of logo generator, I think, but I do actually have some kind of design skills. But...
there you go.
So yeah, and we could use a YubiKey, or like I've got the Phyton RFID key. I don't have it down here in my office, but I've got one of those too. Like it doesn't have to be Authenticator. I mean, Authenticator is probably the easiest one, right? But we could use other methods too. We don't have to use just the Authenticator app or just phone. And I really like using Hello. So like I've got Hello. I have like my GitHub credential in Hello, which makes it so you can just use your face like with the camera. Okay.
Yeah, you can actually use Windows Hello for Business or Windows Hello with everything that's basically supporting FIDO, as Windows Hello for Business is also a FIDO certified credential.
Yeah.
Nice.
So theoretically, you can even use it to sign into Facebook, as they also support FIDO devices.
Now, one question, because this is one that AZ Wildfire is asking too. Can you still get a code, like if I was offline, you can still get a one-time password code, right? If I was, like, say I was, like, I don't know, on a plane where my laptop has Wi-Fi, but my phone does not, I can still come in here and get a one-time code, right? Yeah, like this.
True. Yeah, so it's basically an hash that has been generated that's used to generate that code, and it's also based on timing. So as long as your clock is on the right time, and you have that hash, you're able to generate those codes. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm in the Azure AD portal. This is the same thing you'll see if you just went to the Azure portal and searched for Azure Active Directory. So we want to register an app. So let's go to app registrations here. Zoom this in a little bit, and we're going to create a new one. And I will call this Blazor Server AAD, just like the other one. We'll just do single tenant for now because that's all that matters. And our sign-in is going to be localhost 5001 sign-in -OIDC. Being of course, this is the Kestrel. This is Kestrel, and sign-in OIDC is what most of the ASP.NET and Identity.Web configuration is looking for. You can change this, but that's what we're going to use because that's what's out of the box. So now we've got our app registered. So we've got a new client ID. So let's go update some. We got actually a couple things we need to change in our app config. So I'm going to move this. I'll move this over here to the side. Put our code over here on the other side. Let's go to our app settings. And in our app settings, we've got a few changes to make. So the instance is going to stay the same. Our domain, the domain in this case is this unicorntoso.onmicrosoft.com.
That's correct.
Okay. Our tenant ID, so that's available. That's shown to you here in your app registration. So we'll get this. So we'll grab our directory ID or our tenant ID. We'll put this here. We will grab our client ID, which is also our application ID. So we'll get that from here. Our sign-in path stays the same. Now we do need a secret, which I will go and generate a secret.
Don't dox yourself.
I will generate a secret, and then, which we do over here in certificates and secrets. I'm going to generate one off screen, and then we'll put it in user secret so that it doesn't get out there. So all we're really going to do is down here we're going to use client secret, or we're going to create a new one. So let me create a new one here. New client secret. Call this demo 1 year. And let me grab this, and then I'm going to grab my console window over here for a sec. And let's see, .NET user secrets set Azure AD client secret, and then to this value. Okay. All right. I'll clear my screen here. And good. Okay, so now our application has been reconfigured. So we're using Stefan's tenant. We've got our application that we registered. So we have the correct app that we've registered. Now, the interesting thing here is we only have one API permission out of the box. So the only one that we have is user.read, and admin consent is both not required. So an admin doesn't have to allow this, but it's also not been done either. So no admin has come in here and said that this is okay. We don't have any APIs in our app that we're going to expose. So let's go back.
We're good to go,
application.
are we?
Yeah, let's just see if it runs.
Yeah.
So do a .NET run here, and we've got our windows. I'll just open localhost up in another tab. So localhost 5001. So now we're being asked to sign up, and am I in the wrong context? What's going on here? Oh, you know what? I have the wrong tenant ID in here. So because
Schoolboy error, it's fine.
I know it is. .NET user secrets. Is it remove? Yeah. .NET user secrets remove. Azure AD client ID and .NET user secrets remove Azure AD tenant ID, and now the only thing that should be in there is the client secret. So let's do another .NET run. I think it was just my settings were getting overwritten. Okay, so now we're up and running again. Let's go back to localhost 5001. HTTPS, of course. Localhost 5001. Now we're at the right place. So it's got my account that Stefan created, and it has the same permissions that we consented to in our other tenant from earlier. So now we've reconfigured this app to use Stefan's tenant. So I'm going to go ahead and accept these. And now I'm signed in. So we've got hello up here. And if I go to fetch data, now this may blow up because I don't have any mail and I don't have any Azure tenants. So I don't remember what my code was doing, but oh, so it does.
You got one tenant. Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
So it did get my
Maybe
name.
I should have put in something funny there as a name. I just realizing that.
Too late.
So
Too late, I know.
So we got my name from the graph, right? So that worked fine. And we got our list of Azure tenants. So those are 2 separate API calls, one to Graph to get my name. I don't have a mailbox, so there's no mail to show. And then we also have my Azure tenants, which came from the Azure Management API. So it looks like the app is working as we would expect, right?
Perfect.
Do we want to take a quick break before we move on to making this actually secure?
We're at the top of the hour. We're at the top of the hour, so we might as well take 2 minutes, stretch our legs, and then be back.
Sounds good.
Go get coffee.
See you, everyone.
See you in a few minutes.
Yep.
And we're back. And now, now we get to see now we get to see the headaches that all of our admins have to go through, making sure to secure our terrible code.
Yeah, exactly. So what I wanted to start with is basically a very common, but actually a very bad way of protecting an application, and that's based on a location. And this is one of the most common asks you will get from a security team, is saying, "Oh, I only want the app to be accessible from the corporate network." And that's
before you go in. So what we've done in the first part is everything that a developer can do to protect an app in code, right? We brought the libraries, we enable authentication and what have you. Now we're gonna show what an IT admin or an Azure AD admin can do further to enhance the security of the product, because they work hand in hand. Just the developer implementing the front-end security. By front-end, I mean the application security is not enough. So let's see what else we can do when it comes to securing holistically the app. So sorry for interrupting, but
no, perfect summary.
We've got
Good introduction.
We've got one quick question too.
Sure.
Timebender asks if this will work the same way in Blazor Server and Blazor Wasm, and the code will be different, and how you integrate and how you write the code. It's a little bit different between the two. But everything that Stefan's going to do on the admin side of how do we enforce certain policies and how do we configure Azure AD for signing into this app or for connecting to APIs, that's all the same regardless of if it's Blazor Wasm, if it's Java, C#, a desktop app, a mobile app, whatever, a web app. Everything that he's doing on this side is independent of the language or the framework you're using to actually build the app.
Yep.
And did you say that Blazor Wasm doesn't support incremental consent yet?
Does not support. I don't believe it supports incremental consent yet. Although I was surprised to see that we do support it in the server yesterday. So we want to. So I don't want to say unequivocally now, because the team's been hard at work on getting that going. So.
Cool. Okay. Cool. So I'm in the Azure AD portal. So what I want to do is go to the security features, which are now all nicely stacked under the security button over here, which is actually, I think, it's funny how we introduced it. We actually did an ABC testing, where we, when we merged everything together into the security button, is that some tenants just saw the security button on the bottom of the menu. The other ones saw them at the top. And then we had another one where you didn't see a security button at all, but everything was still spread out. And based on that testing, we decided to put it down there. So that's a little bit of background behind how these things are decided up. I think it took a month or so that we tried it out on multiple tenants. Under security, you have multiple stuff here. So what we're going to talk about today is conditional access. Also identity protection, which hooks in with conditional access. So I'm going to mention that. We have Security Center and continuous access evaluation. I think we can do a full session on what that stuff does. But what it made me think, I thought about this, and it's still in preview, when we started with the blog post, which mentioned token lifetimes and changing token lifetimes. Continuous access evaluation, and feel free to use your favorite search engine to have a look. It's actually going to eliminate the need for you to fiddle with any tokens, but still having that security in place. So that's a cool thing. I won't go through the whole list of things. This is all identity related, but let's dive into conditional access. So actually, conditional access is the #1 Azure AD feature being in use by our customers worldwide. So this is the the biggest feature being used. And as the name says, it will grant you access based, or maybe block access based on conditions. And you can define those conditions yourself in a specific policy. So the first thing you need to do when you go into conditional access, if you ever configure the firewall, forget about that. Because conditional access is a different type evaluation. You don't need to think about what row number I'm going to put in a rule. It's basically kind of gonna look. It's gonna be in, and the strictest one is gonna be in 4. So if I'm gonna build 2 policies for a specific app, it's gonna be an end thing. So this is also a thing to think about when planning these type of stuff. Also, when in most firewall configurations, you will put in a rule like the last rule, rule 99 or whatever, how many rules you put in, which will be a default block. And that's also something that's different in the vision of conditional access. It's a default allow. So if I want to block specific access, and you probably won't want to block it, you probably want to put the right measurements, so the right mitigations in place to still provide your users access. So conditional access have been designed with the idea of mitigating the risk, but enabling user productivity. So making sure that if I want to do something, I can do it. Maybe now I need to take an extra step to prove that it's really me, but I can still do it. So let's build a policy for JP's app. And when I click new policy, you can see the condition, the list over here. So I can target a specific users in groups. I can target specific applications. Then I will put in my conditions. And then I can put in some access controls. So I can say, or do I want to grant access, allow the block, add MFA, those type of things.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is conditional access free to use, or does it require a specific tier of Azure AD?
Very good question. So conditional access, what I'm going to show today, is part of Azure AD Premium P1. Mm-hmm. And the identity protection piece of conditional access is part of Azure AD Premium P2. Okay. There is, however, part of the engine where we have predefined the most basic rules that you need to have in place to mitigate most of the risk. It's called security defaults, and you can actually find it in a different place. Let me switch to that. So if I go to properties, did I remember it well? Yeah. So I go to properties. Mm-hmm. And then you see manage security defaults over here.
Right.
And there I can enable security defaults. So keep in mind that it's an or thing. It's or I'm using security defaults or I'm using conditional access.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So today, if I would create a new Azure AD tenant, security defaults are on by default for every tenant. So that means actually that we give you some of our premium features. Ooh, wait, there we go. For free with every Azure AD tenant to make sure to protect you.
Oh, very nice.
What it will do is it will require all users to register for Azure AD MFA with the Authenticator app. It requires all the administrators to perform multi-factor authentication. Mm-hmm. It will block legacy authentication. So think, for example, active sync type of things that cannot do any type of multi-factor authentication. And it requires users to perform multi-factor authentication when necessary. And this is the cool part. We're actually giving away some of our P2 features because we're only going to ask users to do MFA when the risk of this session of this user is high. So if we see that maybe these credentials are leaked, maybe this user is coming from an unknown location or a combination of those things, then we're only going to ask the user to do MFA.
Nice.
So this comes for free with every Azure AD tenant. Mm-hmm. If I want to have more granular control, I'll probably want to do conditional access. So that's, if you look at most of the enterprises, you want to go with conditional access, and that would require Azure AD Premium P1.
Perfect, thank you.
Cool, yeah. So let's go back to security, conditional access, and then create a new policy. And then, so give it a name. I call it the famous JP policy.
What could possibly go wrong, right?
Only for
Exactly.
JP.
Yeah,
Only for
yeah,
JP.
yeah. Only you have your own special policy now. But you probably, if you look at naming, you probably want to put in some kind of naming convention here as well. One thing I also want to point out is that everything I do here on the GUI can also be done through the API. We actually provide you on our doc space with a set of common conditional access policies that you can import through the API. And you can also use the API, for example, if you have a test tenant, to build those policies in your test tenant, export them and import them. You still want to test them, and I'm going to talk about the testing part in a bit. We actually, based on something that also happened to me, we actually implemented some warnings. And those warnings, I'm going to make sure they pop up. Okay. So first, let's go to assignment. So let's select who this policy will apply to.
Sorry, by API you mean Graph API, right?
Graph API, yeah, the Microsoft Graph API. Yeah.
Cool.
So what I can do, I can target this policy to a selected set of users, or all users, or specific roles. So maybe I want to do only your global admins, or I only want to do guest and external users. So people that are coming from the outside, I want to build a special policy for them.
Nice.
I can also exclude users, and we're going to come to that, because if I click include and then all users, there's the warning popping up. Don't lock yourself out. This policy affects all of your users. So what I did, and this, to be honest, this is my excuse. It's 3 years ago.
Okay. You were new.
I was so new to identity. So I created a policy where I put in I target all users and all applications, and as an action I did a block, and then as a condition I think I did if the risk is high. So what happened is that I needed to do back then you could still do in-person meetings, so I traveled through all the Scandinavian countries. So I started in Finland, then went to Sweden, and when I came to Norway, this is like 1 day each. When I came to Norway, there was a system that kicked in that would tell me what's happening with your account? You've been at one place
all over the place
for months, and now you're all over the place. So there's something wrong. Let's raise the risk to high. And then I got locked out of my own tenant. Luckily, I got an external user, which I could use to go into the tenant and disable the policy. But I can tell you, we had around 30 cases a week of customers that locked themselves out due to this thing. And that's why we put in all those warnings now to make sure that you don't lock yourself out. You can still get access back through support. Yeah. I actually had a partner, I think a year ago, a partner, and this is also the warning when you migrate from a test tenant to a production tenant. He migrated from a test tenant to a production tenant, but just forgot some block policy that was not migrated or something like that. And he came to me on Twitter and he was like, "Can you please help me? I locked out my entire company. Nobody can work again. Can you please?" So he went to support. It took a few hours and they disabled that rule and everyone could sign in again. And luckily, they had a few people that recently acquired a token which is still valid. So a lot of them could still work. But yeah, so be warned, when you play with conditional access, it's very powerful stuff. Let's go to selected users. Select users in groups. And then now, because it's the special... Wait, let me zoom out and see. There we go. It's a special JP group. We're gonna target JP.
I want to be part of that group.
Oh, I don't have your account yet in this tenant, but otherwise. So there you go. So normally, what you want to do, if you want to target all users, you always want to exclude what we call a break glass account. So you always want to have one or two accounts that you want to exclude from a policy to make sure that you all can always get back in. Okay, so now we targeted JP. Now we can select an app. So select an app, and talking about JP. And here's the app that JP registered to my tenant. So we want to add some conditional access to that. if I would go back to the story where I'm talking about like ID tokens and access tokens, because this is defined as a web app / API, it will show up and it will allow it will give access tokens, and that's why it will show up in conditional access in this case. So I can select that. Hopefully, there we go. And then the other thing that is in here, which is also very powerful, is user actions. So instead of targeting an app, I can also target a specific action, which can be register security information. So if I would enroll for MFA, maybe I want to make sure that people that enroll for MFA would can only do that from a managed device, or can only do that from the corporate network. This is what we can do over here. And we can go to conditions.
Somebody says SPA public native client does not show up. Do you know why? What if my app does not show up?
It probably does it consume an access token? You probably want to put the conditional access policy on the API that it's talking to instead of the app itself.
Yeah, because a native client, a public client, isn't going to be an API itself.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So that's why I explained about that. Yeah, the public client and the API. So you want to put it on that. These are the conditions. So I can say I can choose like user risk, sign-in risk, device platforms, locations, client apps, and device state. So user risk hooks into our system, which is identity protection. So the story I just told you about moving from one country to another, or maybe using a Tor browser, or trying to hide myself, or all those type of detections will go into identity protection, and I can use that information in a policy. So I can protect this application without bothering the end user too much. So I can say this application, you can access it wherever you want, whenever you want, from any device, for working from home, it doesn't matter. But if we see for some reason your account is under a specific risk, we will ask you to do MFA. We can also block access, but that would be my last recommendation to put in place, because it will actually, what we will do, it will first of all frustrate the end user because they cannot do their job. And then it will also raise calls to help desk, because now I cannot do my job. The first thing I'm going to do is call some kind of IT person that needs to help me. So always look into how, from a risk perspective, what is the risk and what are the mitigations we can put in place, and what is the balance between end user productivity and security for this one.
So what's what drives that risk, I guess? Like how's that score maybe not necessarily calculated or determined, but like what kinds of stuff goes into that user risk thing?
So we actually have a page on all the, because I always forget one of them. Let me have a look. Yeah, there we go. Just gonna move it into the screen now. So these are the risk detections that we have today, and we also integrate with Cloud App Security. But these are the things that are being extended every time. So, for example, the password spray detection is something that we've added recently to identity protection. And how it will calculate the risk, low, medium, or high, can be based on a combination or based on one specific one. So, for example, a malware-linked IP address sounds very funky. So what we do, we as Microsoft, together with the law enforcement, we go after botnets and malware and those type of things. And then when we find some kind of botnet, it probably has a control center somewhere that will control all the bots that it has infected. So we will replace the control center with something that is ours, and then take over your whole PC and get all your money. No, just. Um,
Well, it could happen.
It's been persistent in video now forever.
Oh no! I made this joke before. It was actually during security days, and it was an audience like 150 people standing in front of me. First session of the day in the morning, so I wanted to make sure that everyone was awake. So I was talking the same thing, and I was saying that, and there was one person like, "What? No! I'm just kidding."
So how long before ZDNet's going to write an article about you and report it to Microsoft executive?
Let's see how long I will be around at Microsoft. So no, what we do is we replace the control centers. When the piece of malware tries to contact the control center, we actually note down the IP and then drop the connection, and that's how we collect that set of information. But because you're probably familiar with things like network address translation type of techniques, that public IP address doesn't have to be linked to a PC that is currently infected, or the infection is already removed from the PC. So this is something that we score as a low risk. But if, for example, if you would combine it with an atypical travel, it could go up to a high risk. So it's all about a combination of those things that will set the risk level for this specific user. And then you also have online detection and offline detection. So online detections happens when you sign in. At the point that you sign in, at that point, we will check a few things. So is this, for example, is this an anonymous IP address? It will be checked real time when you sign in. But if this for example, leaked credentials or an atypical travel are things that are offline detections. So we have machine learning behind it, and we will take data from your sign-ins, and we will put it in the machine learning, and we will see like, okay, we've put you in a specific bucket. You are this type of user. You're in this bucket with these other users that are in this bucket. But now you fall out of that bucket. It means that you're probably under a risk, and it could be one of those things. So we will flag the user. And then you can take next other steps, which are part of conditional access. For example, you can make a policy that would say, if you're under a medium risk, a medium user risk, next time you sign in, you need to do MFA and you need to change your password. And the cool thing there as well, because we also provide hybrid capabilities, is that we can sync back that password to on-prem AD, and from there it can sync back to other applications. So we're not also protecting cloud accounts, but also on-premises accounts with that. So those are the user risk. Those are those offline detections. So the leaked credentials, for example, and then we have the sign-in risk, which could be an atypical location. So we can use those as conditions in our policy. And then we can target a specific platform as well. So maybe we want to build specific policies for different platforms. So I can include any device, or I can select a specific platform, or I can exclude a specific platform as well if I don't want to make this policy for this specific platform. And then we come to the thing that we started with, the most basic stuff, right? We want to block access from a specific location. So what I can do here is that I can say configure yes. I can say any location, but I want to exclude a location. So you cannot have access from, and I already created a location which is home office. You cannot have access from the home office. And this is just a list of IP ranges that I configure, and I will show you in a bit how that looks. What I can also do is make it more strict. I can say include only selected locations. So I only want to have access from the office. And I'm not going to exclude, so let's put it on that. I'm not going to exclude anything except the trusted location. So now I only have access to this app from the home office or from the corporate network. So the reason I'm saying this is not a very good practice is all around token lifetimes. Because I'm with my laptop at the home office, in this case home office, I get access to the app, I get an access token and a refresh token, which are valid for the access token standard for an hour, which also mean that I take my laptop, I go outside, sit on a bench and use the public Wi-Fi, but I still get an access token that is valid. It will still grant me access to that resource, even though the policy is in place. What will happen is the next time you try to get a new access token, so after an hour that token will expire, we will check the first three octaves of your IP address to see if that has been changed. And if there are changed, then we're going to challenge you again, and we're going to reevaluate the conditional access policies. If they haven't changed, that means that you're still at the same network, and we still can grant you access. I'm just going to put this to no. And then we have client apps. So we can also say if it's a browser, a mobile app, a desktop app. And for legacy auth, we can check if it's an active sync client or any other clients, which means that basically anything else. Let me zoom in there. So POP, IMAP, SMTP, those are protocols that don't understand multi-factor authentication. That will be put in the legacy bucket, which you probably want to block, because what happens is, I told you, I'm more than happy to put my credentials in the Twitch chat when I put on MFA. But if I don't block these legacy authentication, someone can grab those credentials and sign in using POP, IMAP, or SMTP if they're enabled, and still get access to my data. So that's a good thing to keep in mind when configuring those things. Device state basically means that is the device joined and compliant. So if I have my
Intune, is that Intune, right?
Yeah, so it can be compliance will come from Intune and will be fed into Azure AD. So in Intune, I can configure some rules. I can say this device cannot be jailbroken. It needs to be encrypted. That will get into Azure AD, and I can set that as a condition for you to get access to a specific resource. Okay, and then I can go to access controls and actually say what should happen here. So you can say block access, which is pretty straightforward, right? I didn't put in a condition. I only put in JP as a user. If I would put block access right now, I would select it, and JP will try to sign into his app. He will get blocked, and he don't get any access. I probably want to go a little bit to the sweet spot here and say, okay, and I don't want to grant access. I probably want to require multi-factor authentication or require the device to be compliant or joined. And then we have two less common ones, which are require approved client app. So in Intune, so there's a list of approved apps that are here, which are our apps. And these are apps that can support specific controls that you can put in place. So for example, if I would select that require approved client app, I can only go to that resource from these apps that are in this list, because I know these apps are tested to be able to do things like encryption or those type of things.
Well, now, so on that, and the compliant client apps, if I build an app with, say, like the Intune SDK for iOS or Android, do my business apps, are they also considered compliant apps if they have a protection policy and stuff on them? Like, can I still limit them to only, limit like this approved client app? Could I also do that with my own apps if I'm using Intune SDK, or?
That would be the app protection policy. So that won't be the approved client app. That would be the app protection policy that's beneath it. Which kinda is the same. It only adds an extra layer of protection. So with the app protection policy, it's basically a wrapper around your app. It means that I can say you can only use this app when your device is encrypted or if it's not jailbroken. Even if your device is not managed by any MDM provider. If it's not managed by Intune, I can still check that. And how we do that is that basically it's based on identity. So for example, I need to sign into the app. At that point, we will reach out to your tenant and grab that app protection policy and apply it to that app. So the protection policy can be check if the device is jailbroken or not. And that's what this thing can do. So I can build an app which can contain data that I don't want to get out of the app. So I can actually put things in place like don't copy stuff out of this app. Don't save stuff to your personal iCloud on a device that is not managed by Intune or anything. So this is, for example, if I have people coming in, if I have temporary people coming in with their own devices and they need to have access to corporate data, but I still want to be in control, I can use this to stay in control, because what I can also do with the app protection policy is delete all the content of the app. So if the contract would end, I can just say bye, and the content will be removed from their device, even though you don't manage the device, or maybe it's managed by their organization. And then I already talked a little bit about the require password change. So that a policy here could be if you're under a high risk, we want you to change your policy. And then you see empty and guest terms of use. Empty is just something I do to test.
I was going to ask if that was an out of the box one or not.
No, it's not. So the two things beneath there, let me show you where they come from. And one of the things I'm going to show you, and you need to promise me you're gonna completely forget about that afterwards, because it's actually gonna go away. But I want to show you where the empty is coming from. So I need to go back then. Let just go back to the main conditional access screen. So you can see here we have a few other options. So the named locations is where I defined the home office location. And the home office location will contain my personal IP address. So I'm not going to open it, but you should trust me, my IP address is in there. And then we have custom controls, and this is where the empty is coming from. So a few years ago, we wanted to give customers the ability to use their third-party MFA with conditional access. Oh. So this is what custom controls can do, and it actually has some integration with Duo, with Ping, with some other things. What we figured out after a few years going forward, things are changing, is that this is not the best way of doing this. So we're moving this to authentication methods, and this is going to go away in the future. I just did a test for a customer. That's why the empty is here. There you go. And then it will show up in conditional access. But again, what I said, this is one of the things that went into public preview and not going to make it to GA. It's going to move into a different place. And then the terms of use, which is a very powerful thing, is that what I can do here is that before someone can use the app, I can force them to agree to, or I can ask them to agree to a terms of use. And that terms of use, let me do this one, can be different languages and will be a PDF document showing to the end users. You can actually see who consented to it. So I can have an overview of all the people that consented when they consented to it. So this can be a part of a compliance piece. But also as an external user, I can even revoke the consent. So if I would go to, let me just open that here. If I would go to my apps or my applications, how you want to call it, just give me a sec. I'm just going to sign in there. Over there, I have an option to have an overview of all the terms of use that I consent to. And from there, I can actually remove the consent as well. It's still loading. I will show it in a bit. Also, I can download the report here as well. And you can see what the consent is. I think this is just an empty PDF because it's required to upload a PDF. Yeah, it is. Oh, wait. Please accept the terms of use. Don't you like that? So this is also something that I can put into a conditional access policy. If for example, if I have guessed other people from other companies using my app, they need to consent to the terms of use of those apps. So that's the one showing up. And let me create the JP policy again.
And just too, like, because I know we've been a lot of chat and stuff too. I mean, these apps can be hosted anywhere. They could be on-prem,
Yep.
they could be in AWS, they could be in Google, Azure. It doesn't matter where they're hosted as long as they have,
Correct.
as long as they're using Azure AD for authentication. So there's no
Correct.
dependency on this being in an Azure subscription for it to work. I mean, it runs on my local machine, for example, as part of for development. So even if you've got your apps hosted in data centers, colos, and other clouds, all of this is still available.
True. Yeah, and I think that's the powerful thing, and now I'm going to sound a little bit marketing-y, but to making Azure AD your identity control plane, where you really have the control at one single spot for all your application. Again, doesn't matter where they are. So JP, I'm going to be nice. I'm only going to say that you need to do multi-factor authentication. Okay. So I'm going to select this one. One thing I want to point out is that you can also do multiple things. So you can say require all the selected controls or one of the selected controls, which means I can say your device needs to be managed. But if I'm not on a managed device, for example, what happened early last year is that people suddenly needed to work from home, maybe from a different device. You can say, oh, I require MFA. That means that I'm, as an end user, I'm still able to do my job to sign in. Okay, I need to do an extra MFA prompt, and still you have a bit of a certainty that the user is really who he says that he is, because you have that MFA piece. But normally they would work from a device that is Intune managed, that we control, so you can do all of these controls. Or you can say, so that's one of the selected controls, or you can say all of the controls. So I can say you need to do MFA, and your device needs to be managed, and you need to accept the terms, and you need to accept empty. The last one is not true, but you can do all of them as well. So this is basically, yeah.
That's the inside of our souls after working from home for 10 months. It's empty.
It's like all the white walls I have around me. It will define that. So that's that, and then we have a cool thing over here, which is called Session, and this is our integration with MCAS, with the Microsoft Cloud App Security, and there are a few other things here. So the conditional access app control, what it will do is it will leverage the proxy functionality of Microsoft Cloud App Security. So what I can do here is that I can say, okay, you're under a certain risk. I still want to give you access, but you can only have read-only, and I want to know everything you do in a session. I want to block downloads. And that's a thing that Microsoft Cloud App Security can do. It can, instead of sending you directly to the app, proxy it through Cloud App Security, and it can interfere with the data it's serving. So it can block downloads, it can put stuff in read-only mode, and it can also give a full audit log on everything you did inside of that app. And that's what we do with the app control. We actually have some predefined policies that will automatically be created in Microsoft Cloud App Security. So you don't need to switch into another portal to get this set up, which makes me think of a few community initiatives to create a new portal which would list all the Microsoft portals. They will actually group them by M365, Azure, and all that stuff. Yet another portal. That's actually, there was a customer once who made an abbreviation for yet another portal, but they also used a not so nice word in that abbreviation as well. So I'm not going to repeat it. But yeah.
Is there any way for a developer to know the state of conditional access or anything like that, so that we can do those kinds of controls ourselves, or is that like an MCAS only kind of a thing?
That's an MCAS only thing.
Okay.
So the idea here is to centralize the policies to the control plane. So it basically means that's also the reason that if I sign into an app, the app isn't aware of the specific conditional access policies that have been applied. They don't need to know about it, because we want to keep that control in that central location where we can manage it and where we can audit it. So I, as a developer, don't even need to care if I need to do MFA or if it needs to be a trusted device. That's something that comes from the security department.
And you get this for free, right? I mean, for free as in you don't have to implement any custom code to deal with that. All you do is just integrate with Azure AD, and then it's all down to how strict your policies within the organization are, and that's brilliant.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've been talking now for 45 minutes about the policy. Theoretically, you can set it up in 10 seconds, and you have MFA for your application, which is pretty neat. And then we have the sign-in frequency. This is just the lifetime of your refresh token. And then we can also define, can this sign-in be persistent or not? So where JP clicked on, do you want to stay sign in? And he clicked on yes. We can actually control that prompt and remove it and make the decision for the end user. So we can say never persistent or always persistent. And this is just the cookie that is stored in your browser, if it's going to be persistent or not.
And
okay.
Then, I guess the other side to this too is that if I'm building like SaaS, right, that I'm going to sell, I don't have to worry about any of this because it's my customers' data, but your customers' administrators are the ones who are going to be designing policies for their own users, right? So if Walmart or Coca-Cola or some huge company has a ton of policies that they want to enforce, that's cool, and they can do that for their users. But if Joe's Muffler Shop, only wants to do MFA for Joe and the 3 other people that work there, then Joe can do that. And you as the developer, you don't really have to be in the middle of that at all. You don't know, you don't have to do anything about it because ultimately it's up to your customer admins instead of up to you.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the cool thing about it. And then if we look at enable policy, and I did the zoom on the wrong screen. This slider I heard can be a little bit confusing, but it basically gives you 3 options for this policy. So it's now on report only, which means that it will be enabled, but it won't be enforced. So when I put it on report only and you would sign in, I can see in the audit logs that you signed in, and I can see if the policy has been applied, but it won't be applied for the end user. So this is highly recommended. Like if you create a policy, first put it in report only mode and see if you're not going to lock out everyone from your tenant, even if you ignored all the warnings that you got, and see how it goes and if it goes according what you think of it, and then switch it to on to make sure the policy is on. So right now I trust myself that I did the right thing. So I'm just going to put it on and press create. It's going to validate the policy, and now it's here on the list. The JP policy, I'm going to leave this on there forever. JP policy. But what I can also do is I can do a what if. So I created a policy. If I go to what if, I can select a user. So let me first select myself. There we go. And then I can choose which app I'm going to access. So select an app. I'm going to select the JP app. I was about to select it. Okay, luckily I did. There we go. I need to just press it there, select it, done. And then I can choose all kinds of conditions to emulate. So I can say, which IP address do I come from? Which country? Which is there a risk? Is there a user risk? Yes. For now, the policy I created just said, if it's JP, any app, I don't care, he needs to do MFA because we want to annoy.
we don't trust this guy.
We don't trust him, and we want to annoy him. So now I can say, I'm first going to try with my user. So I can say what if, and then you would say the policies that will apply. For me, no policies. And then the policies that will not apply. And you can see the JP policy, it's on, but it will not be applied. So I'm going to do the same thing, but now I select JP. As a user, select, and then press what if. And then if we go to policies that will apply, you will see that the JP policy will be applied, and it would require him to do multi-factor authentication. So this is one way of the check to see what your what the impact would be of your conditional access policy that you've created. The report only mode goes a step further after this. It basically means if now JP would sign in, I can see in the audit logs that he signed in and what happened. But I already put it on. So that would mean that right now, if JP would sign into the app would try to do anything, he would get a multi-factor authentication prompt. But it depends. If he already did multi-factor authentication, he's not going to be prompted again because he already did it. So JP, I would like to invite you to try to sign into your app again with your account.
Okay. Yes. All right,
and see if I did a good job protecting this app right now with MFA. And then I also gonna put in the monitoring here.
Nice.
Okay, cool. So, and while I'm switching this, we actually got a question about how hard would this be to transition later, right? And I think the thing is the application code itself is we haven't changed the code, right? So we're using our library, but it's all OpenID, right? It's all OpenID Connect and OAuth 2. And so the code in your application itself wouldn't change dramatically. Like you would update configuration to point to a new OpenID provider or a new OAuth provider. The big difference would just be that if whatever identity system you're moving to you'd have to re-implement whatever their conditional access type thing is. Like what if they offer something like that, it'd have to be re-implemented somewhere else. So it's less about, you don't have to implement this at every single app. We have dozens and dozens and dozens of apps, and we don't want to have to go and implement things like MFA in every single one of them. And so MFA, the conditional access policies that trigger MFA, all the things like user risk and all that's all done by the identity system, and so the apps themselves are independent of it. All the apps need to do is use Azure AD as an identity provider. So, okay, so we've got our thing here. So I'm signed out, and I'm going to try to log into the app, and so I got to put in my password, and I have to put in my password correctly, and now I got to get my phone, and it's asking me to approve this sign in. So I got a thing on my phone. There it is, right? Like, oops, 73. So approve that. Anybody else who managed to copy the QR code, I guess you can do it for me.
Too slow.
Yep. So I had MFA, so that's cool. So I had MFA, so that's good. And yeah, we'll stay signed in. Why not? And there we go. Now we're back in the app. And if we go fetch some data, then we see our calls being made. And there they are. Cool. Nice.
Oh man, that's brilliant.
Yeah, right.
So
somebody's asking about the number matching.
Oh, so the 73 is the passwordless, right? Wait a minute.
Stefan should not tease people with stuff that is not publicly available.
No, this is just so the reason you get this is just MFA with the Authenticator app, and the reason we do the numbers. So basically, what you haven't seen on JP's screen is that there are actually 3 numbers showing up, 3 different numbers, and it needs to match the number on the screen. The whole reason we've put this in is to prevent hammering of people with MFA. So just to give you an example, someone got my credentials, my username and password, but there is MFA. So what I will do, I will just keep on trying to sign in, and that person is in a very important meeting, and his phone keeps on buzzing with that MFA prompt. So at some point, he got so annoyed, he probably gonna press approve and buy, and the attacker is in.
Right.
I can actually give you another example that this is a real life problem. A year ago, a new app showed up in the Google Play Store, which was called Auto MFA Approve. The only thing that app would do would automatically approve those MFA notifications.
Nice.
It's not in the store anymore, but this is the reason we have that numbering system it's still not completely secure, but now you need to grab your phone and actually press the right number. So
all right, here I got my phone
that's
up
the reason.
I got my phone up on the screen,
awesome.
So you can see what it is. So I've signed out. I'm going to sign into the app. I'm going to type in my password, right? And so now it says 48. You'll notice I got a notification on my phone, right? And I've got 3 numbers that I have to choose from, and that's the one that says which one's on the screen. So it's number 48. So if I was to tap one of these different ones, it's essentially the same as tapping deny. But because if I do 48 and hit approve, it's also going to ask me for my finger. So I got to put my finger on it, which you can't see. And then it says approve down here at the bottom, and there we go. Now we're approved.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that's the whole reason of the numbering stuff that is
Yeah.
that is there.
Yeah, cool. So then the other thing too is, like we were saying, like I started to do this but I didn't have enough time, but I mean, if we wanted to deploy this into AWS, we could, right? Like we could put this app literally anywhere we wanted to. And all of the policy still applies, all of the MFA or do whatever it is that you have to do, all of that still stays the same. Because ultimately it has no bearing on whether or not you host the app in Azure. It only really matters that you're using Azure AD as sort of your central place. So
Exactly. So
cool.
one thing that if we have 30 seconds, one thing I want to show, which I think is pretty cool. So if you can switch to my screen.
Yeah. Give me a sec.
So these are the sign in logs, and you can actually see JP signing in, and that it succeeded. And I see you also tried some testing, right? Like interrupted, failure, and this interrupted basically means like you got the MFA prompt, but it canceled it. And these are things that could indicate that an attacker has your credentials and could be a potential risk.
Right.
So these are things that you can monitor. And the cool thing is you can all feed this into your SIEM system as well, put alerts in place. And integration, for example, I think that's also a pretty cool thing to show, not for now, but for example, with Sentinel, it's only 3 clicks and you're integrated within Sentinel and can set up all those things. But the other thing, if I click the success one here and look into the details, and now I really need to click it. Actually is a conditional access tab that will show all the conditional access policies that have been applied to this user. And what is the result of that policy? So you can see some policies are disabled, some are not applied. And this one is applied, and we can click it, and it will actually give all the information about why is it applied. It's applied because it's matched the user, it's matched the application. And so all that data is there as well, and it gives you a lot of insights. And then I show the report only. So if you put it in report only, the policy will show up over here, and you get all those details, and you can figure out why did this policy apply or why didn't it apply. For example, if you do a specific location or a managed device and it doesn't work, all those details are in those sign-in logs. So I think this is a very good way of figuring out and setting up conditional access and playing around, getting all those details. So there was the last thing I wanted to show. I think it's pretty cool.
Very cool. Well, and Chicken Man tells us too, like, these logs, especially when you're starting to roll this out, the logs are kind of your friend. And I know I've been getting a bunch of private pings from our friend AZ Wildfire about, we should do this with Sentinel. We got to do all these other things that we want to show people. So I think we'll have to do those in an upcoming show of getting these integrated into Sentinel, and then
cool.
Because Sentinel has so much. So. Well, this has been awesome. I think this has been great, and I really appreciate you coming and hanging out with us.
Sure, it was fun.
Stefan works with us, so you can ping us, and we'll make sure it gets to him. But he's also on Twitter. His Twitter handle's over there to the left of his name. Feel free to reach out to him or to any of us if you have any questions, issues, concerns, whatever. Of course, we're on Discord. The Discord link we put in the chat a couple times, but it's we'll put it back in there right before we go. We're on Twitter, and of course, ping us at 425show@microsoft.com if you have any issues or personal attacks that you want to share with us. We will be back on Monday. What are we doing on Monday, Christos?
I think we're doing Go with Azure DevOps.
Yeah, Go. Oh, nice.
We have one of our CDAs.
All right, very cool. So we'll be back on Monday. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Let's find somebody to go raid. Although, is Frank coming up after us today?
He might be. I don't know his schedule though, so we may want to.
So
we might want to raid somebody in the meantime.
Yeah, let's go find somebody to raid. How about anybody got any suggestions for who we should go raid? Anybody suggestions? Let's see who's out there. Clarkio?
Clarkio, he's great as always.
All right. Well, I guess we'll all go over to Clark, and I hope everybody has a great weekend. And it's supposed to snow here.
Instafluff is also on.
It's supposed to snow here in South Carolina, so there's no milk or bread within 200 miles. It's not actually going to snow. It won't snow. Everybody says it will, but it won't. So, all right, let's go over to Clark. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.